Hello, welcome to the June 24th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo. I'm going to do a quick audio test and then we will get started. Okay, everything sounds fine on my monitoring computer. As I mentioned before, my name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. If you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions in advance by emailing clubcubase@steinberg.de. Let me just turn off. So you could send a question in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or just simply ask if you could ask in the chat field live. We'll try to get through all the questions in order that they've been asked. And when asking questions, if you could indicate which version of Cubase, whether it's 10, 10.5, 11, or 12, which level, whether it's LE, AI, Artist, Elements, or Pro, what platform you're on, that information would often be helpful. So we'll try to get through all the questions chronologically as asked. I don't have the ability to answer all the questions in real time, so I will try my best to catch up throughout the live stream. But if you don't get an immediate response to your question, if we could refrain and try not to ask the same question repeatedly, that just kind of slows down the whole process for me to get through more questions. So I would appreciate that. We should have later tonight all of the topics covered in the live stream pinned to the top of the comments field with timestamps so that you could go specifically to different areas. And also, if you want to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, we're probably approaching 19,000-ish questions since the pandemic started. So at that point, you could go to cubaseindex.com and look there, and Jan from Stockholm has been kind enough to compile that website. So it's a searchable index of all the topics that we've covered. We also want to give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude, who serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They are just kind of doing this to make it a better community for attendees and for everyone involved. So I want to give special thanks to them. And also another wonderful resource of information that's available is the Cubase Nation Discord. And Jazz Dude does a lot of work compiling relevant content and tutorials that are available there. So we want to give special thanks to Jazz Dude for that. And, and everyone who helps other members in the community. Just, it's a wonderful family of people helping each other out. So, and once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products. And I'm based out of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. Just one quick note before we get started. Next live stream on Tuesday, that will be the last of the month. So we usually, what we do is a 2-hour live stream followed by a Zoom meetup where we could, meet each other and all talk, and we could listen to other people talk, and it's always wonderful conversations and discussions on music, and I look forward to it every month. So we'll have the Zoom link for that. If you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, or we could just post it in the actual in the meeting. So we'll post a link for the Zoom meetup. And after that, I will be taking a quick couple days off for around the 4th of July. So the meeting on July 1st, 1 week from today, I'll be on vacation. And also that following Tuesday is when I get back from vacation. So we'll pick up the live streams on our normal schedule starting on July 8th. So just a programming note, if you will. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we had a question. I think it might have been cut off when I switched over my chat field about how to print. It was a question about watching a video with Ian Kirkpatrick and how to print the reverb return or export the reverb return on a particular channel. Sorry, sometimes the questions sent in advance can sometimes get cut off. So let's go ahead and answer that. So let's say we have a drum loop here, and I wanted to put reverb on it, and I wanted the actual, and I just saw, I got an email with the topic. Let me just see if it's something that we could incorporate quickly. Bear with me just a second. Okay. All right, so we'll try to incorporate that question in. But if you're watching a live stream, you could just enter the questions in the chat field as opposed to sending an email during the live stream. But we'll see if we get to this. It's a question about MIDI volume. All right, so when let's say we wanted to, so the question was how to print a reverb to an existing, just a reverb track. So let's say we have a drum loop here, and let's go ahead and add an effects channel such as a reverb to this. Okay, so the question was how to print just a reverb so that we can edit and chop that up creatively. So to do that, there's a couple of different ways. One is we could just choose to do an export audio mixdown. So I'll come over to my export audio mixdown, and I could just come over here. I'll just choose multiple, and then we'll only select the effects channel here, and we could just make sure we have I just have groups and sends turned on. I'm not sure if I need to, but we'll just turn that on, and I'm going to choose to create an audio track. So now when we export, it's going to export between the left and right locators. And as we listen to this, we can now choose to export that particular audio file. And now this should be just a reverb. And then we have the dry signal here. Now, another way I think that we could do this also is let's add an audio track. Excuse me. And we'll make it a stereo track, and let's say for its input, what I want to do is to have the revelation as the input, and I will just go ahead and record. So now we are routing the effects end to an input of a track. So now when we come over here, we have the dry sound, and now just the effect of that particular channel without the dry sound one. So that's two different ways that you could print or export and have the reverb isolated for more creative tasks. So you can do your best Ian Kirkpatrick production tricks. So Ian is very clever with how he works. All right. So we have a question. When recording audio and track monitor is on, I hear the audio to the recorded very well. When I record enable the track, there's a big drop in volume on a track I am monitoring. Ideas to fix. So one is as you go to, add your audio track, this could be dealing with direct monitoring. So if you have your volume track here, like the volume fader that you're recording, that could adjust the playback level. So when we go to your studio setup, and let's go to your audio interface, if you have direct monitoring turned on, how this works is it's not going to run through any of the processing for software plugins or software level adjustments. So if direct monitoring is turned on, the signal from the input is being monitored, and basically it's monitoring directly. That signal is going from the input directly to the output. So there's no attenuation by plugins or volume levels. So, check to see if you select your audio interface under studio to studio setup. if you toggle the direct monitoring status, if you have kind of a consistent volume level at that point. So that could create a volume disparity. All right, so we have a question from Best Korean Jesus. It says, I have a question about removing MIDI notes. Same issue with Logical Editor. I see there's a function delete notes and it uses ticks. I don't know what PPQ or clicks are. Do you mind explaining? All right, so let's say if we wanted to remove particular notes. So I will come here. Let's do some, I'll just do a quick instrument track. I'll just send it to nowhere, make it faster. So, all right, so if we come over and we have, let's say we'll just put some notes. All right, so we have notes in C3, E3. Okay, so now let's say if I wanted to delete particular notes, let's go to our MIDI logical editor. So we'll come and go to the logical editor. All right, so we come over here. So let's just say to delete notes, you know, we could say I just want to come over here and delete notes. And then we could say I wanted to delete notes whose pitch is equal to C3. So now as I come over here and hit apply, then we will be able to delete particular notes. So just like that. So there's no PPQ. Now, if you come over here and choose, I think if we choose position as a as a factor, which you shouldn't need to do, then you could get a choice of PPQ. And we could think of this as parts per quarter note, or if we wanted to see it in seconds. So, you know, we could just kind of come over here and say we want to delete notes that are at this sample position. So we could think of this as being almost like, you know, what the clock pulse division is. Like, so when we look at a particular note, we can see that we have, you know, this is measure 6, beat 2, 16th note division 2, and our 16th division of 40. So that's what the PPQ is, but you shouldn't need to actually, it's not really a relevant parameter for just deleting notes, but that's what your PPQ and different settings are. So if you wanted to delete a note that was at a specific PPQ, so let's say if I come here and I wanted to delete this note that starts at 53177, I could now say, okay, we want to delete all C3s at the position equal to 5.3.1.77. So now I could only delete those notes that fall at that particular PPQ value. So that's just kind of a further refinement. But, you know, we think of this as parts per quarter note versus absolute time in seconds or samples or in SMPTE frames. So let me know if that makes sense. Okay, so we have a question from Jay. It says, I'm curious about picking up a 32-bit floating point interface. I know the field recorders have them, but I'm wondering if unspecified ones from Steinberg are 32 fixed or floating point. So generally, you always want to have, you know, the URC series and the AXR have 32-bit fixed converters, which is kind of a step above of the 32-bit floating point, and that will also allow you to do 64-bit floating point processing. So the UR22C, UR44C, UR816C, AXR4U, AXR4T, they all have 32-bit integer converters, so it's going to be kind of a cut above those other converters. All right, wonderful to see Walter Blackledge from St. Louis Club Cubase. We have Stefan from Sweden. We see Jazz Dude from Germany. We have Panos from Greece, if memory serves. We have John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. We have Detlef from Dusseldorf. Thanks for joining us today, being part of the community. All right, we have Samson Strike from Austria. All right, so we have Sam from Haverhill, England. Thanks for joining. All right, my chat field just jumped on me. All right. And Best Green Jesus from San Diego, and Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. All right, so we have a question from Marco Carbone, or Carbone. Is there a way to load a default track with inserts I need without browsing the presets? Example, I create audio track and I will find my inserts still loaded. So the only way to do that is to really, add it via track presets or drag and drop track presets over. Or just, you could import a track archive. There's also just, the ability of starting off with a template, but there's no kind of default track setup with particular plugins loaded on it. So it would have to be like a track preset. All right, so we see Jesse Griffin, and we have Nick joining in. I believe Nick's from the UK. We have Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Glad you can make it, Michael. And Michael wants people to whack the like button. And if you do learn a new tip or trick, make sure you do subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. All right, Michael Teams has started with distribution of ice cream. So it's always welcome, especially in a hot summer for a lot of people in the Northern Hemisphere. All right, we have Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. Thanks for joining. All right, we have Ed from Paris, Ontario. All right, and we have Javier from Chile. All right, so we see Michael Teams is, all right, so we see from Jesse Griffin, he's just starting to get a hang of Cubase, just barely. All right, so we have Matt Elston checking in. It says Thunder and Lightning in the UK, pleased to be inside watching the stream. All right, and we just had Thunder and Lightning here in Washington, D.C. area. So let's see if we have more questions coming in. All right, so we see question. If I update from Cubase 11 Elements to Cubase Pro 12, will I be able to open my projects without problem? Yes, so all the projects can be opened. You can open up projects from, Cubase SX1 all the way up to Cubase 12, so it's the same file format. So won't be any problems updating directly from that. So your files will load up. All right, and we see Chris HALion from Columbia, South Carolina. All right, we'll see if we get some more questions come in. If not, we had some people submit questions via email. That we can get to earlier. Okay, so I'll go ahead and go to some of the questions that were submitted in advance, and we'll let kind of the questions for the live chat kind of pop up. Okay. So we have a question. It says, "I'm not a real bass player, but I purchased Steinberg's electric bass. Can Greg recommend a patch? Some often work good for standard pop and other patch for jazz." All right, and also with this, so let's go ahead and take a look. So we'll go to our instrument track and let's add a HALion Sonic SE. And we'll go to the electric bass. So I would maybe start off, a lot of people, like my default one that I would tend to go for is kind of the clean J bass. So when you kind of come over here, and this is really just utilizing, 2 single coil pickups. And then you're going to have the choice of using kind of different, pickups. So whether you want it to be the neck pickup, most of the time when people are doing jazz bass, it's going to be a single coil and using the bridge pickup. And this is really good for being able to kind of cut through a mix and not kind of cloud it. And let's say at this point, another popular thing would be, having just a P bass pickup. So as we would kind of switch to different pickup configurations, so that's going to be basically 2 single coils, together, but you can't really break it out. So often kind of just the jazz bass. And this is, like a physically modeled tone knob. I tend to like to have a bit more tone when I do it some things. So that's what I would maybe go for first, is just going to be like the clean J bass preset. And we had kind of follow up from this. So second question in this, can bass player Greg say a little about what a bass player noticed when a beginner playing bass to a song? Beginner common mistakes. Okay, so one of the things that you could do is, let's say I have this loaded up and I wanted to just have, let's see if this will just, all right. Okay, so one thing that for MIDI sequencing that people often miss is, let's say I just have my bass part here. All right, so I'll just come here and let's say I was just going to sequence kind of a quick bass line with this. So we'll use the electric bass. So some things that you could do for making more realistic bass parts. All right, so say we have just a little bit of a bass line there, and I'm a horrible keyboard player. So some things that I would do as a bass player that are really kind of convenient is you may have, and a lot of times you may have just like stuff that's one trick that I always like to do is, so a lot of times in tracks that people hear, you'll often have compression, and you don't want necessarily the bass to kind of drop out a lot. So if you come here, let's say we listen to this little phrase again in measure 11. All right, and let's say if I will quantize that just to make it a little less irritating. All right, so, but if we select these particular notes and go to MIDI, and let's come over here and one of the MIDI functions you'll have is legato. So, and what that'll do is that will hold the note out until the next note starts. So, and I may have, we go to length here. We could just say, I want this to have no overlap whatsoever. So, and again, what that's going to do is just kind of to set the notes so that they will hang over. So we could just say apply legato. So these notes will now last until the next note begins. So that's something that I often do if I'm doing like, you know, MIDI bass editing for someone. So that's a typical thing that I would do for like a lot of MIDI bass parts to make it sound like a produced bass part. All right, so we had a question. How can I know which key switch is activated when an image of an instrument is missing in HALion 6 macro page? For example, the brass section XXL. So let's go ahead and open this in HALion. So we'll come over here. Let's get to our instrument. And we'll open it in HALion 6. I think that this is a HALion Sonic patch. So we'll just get the instrument loaded up here. Okay, so we have brass section XXL, and this is the patch. And so the comment is when we come over here, there's no macro page. Not all instruments will have a macro page. So let's come over here and add HALion Sonic from the synths. So say we go to the full version of HALion Sonic, which if you have HALion, you also have a license to the HALion Sonic, and we can think of that as more the playback engine. So if I was looking for the brass section here, we can see that when we open it up, and I think that this is a patch here. So there's no real macro editor, but if we come over to the edit page and we click at layer 1, we can see all the different key switches for this particular brass. So as you want to just switch between different levels of articulations, you could see this here. So this isn't necessarily like a macro page that's created, but what we could do now to see the different articulations that are in HALion. So since there is no macro page, when we go to the macro view, it doesn't exist. But if you wanted to see what articulations were available, if you go to the program tree on the right-hand side, we can now see all the different articulations that are available here just by clicking on the instrument sound. So you could see all those different components there. One other way to determine this, and this may be more practical, is let's say if we're in HALion and we have a part that is created, we could go to our expression map and choose to import key switches. And since it's a HALion based instrument, it'll now just import all of the key switches for that particular library. And if we switch to our key editor here, we can see, let's go to articulations and dynamics. That as soon as we do that we could see all of the available articulations listed right there. So give that a try. All right, we had a question emailed in, how to crossfade between two events that are on separate tracks. Okay, it's a great question. It just came up. I was helping a guy who was doing a project with Paul McCartney this week, so this came up. And so let's come over here, and I'm just going to duplicate this particular track. All right, so the concept is we want to take these tracks here that are on two different, we're going to take audio that's on two separate tracks and be able to crossfade. So generally, if we have the events overlapping, we can hit the X key and that will do a crossfade. But if they're on separate tracks and we wanted to remain, we wanted those two events, like maybe different tracks or different types of edits, that we wanted to crossfade, you know, have this fade out while this fades in, but still be on separate tracks. So here I'm just going to choose my grid, and then I'm going to just select, and this doesn't have to be done, but we could just say events. So what I want to do is to say, okay, I want to do a range selection. And if I have the events, we could just have it automatically snap to the events when we use the range tool. And then I'm going to hit the letter A, like Apple. And then we can see that this event here will do a fade in based on the range selection. And this event will do a fade out. So that's kind of all you have to do. So if I just wanted to now come over here, let's say start with this, we have the range, it's going to snap to the events, hit the letter A, and then we can see the fade in and the fade out. So the fade out at the end of the event and the fade in at the beginning of the event. And that's how you could do a crossfade. And if you needed to edit, you could. But that's a quick way of being able to do a fast linear crossfade across multiple tracks. And if you wanted to change what your default fade was, you could do that as well. So say if we're here, you could just double click. So if you wanted a sinusoid or a logarithmic fade in, fade out by default, you could set that there as well. Okay, so let's go to the next question that was sent in. Okay, so we had a question about the SSL UF8. So about auto banking, and if you're not familiar with kind of what the auto banking is, let's say if I wanted to come directly, I will add a number of tracks. So let me just add a number of audio tracks here. Okay, and I'm going to switch my remote control, my MIDI remote here, let's say to my Chord Nano. And I'm going to just come over here and say mixer. So when we look at this, and I'll make all these tracks a little smaller. All right, and then if I just kind of select different tracks, we can see that this will, we see this little white line here, and this white line is indicating the control. So when we just kind of select outside of that, we can just have, even just with the MIDI remote, we could have that kind of automatically follow within banks. But generally, the Mackie, so the question was, does Cubase have an auto banking feature for working with the SSL UF8? And they had contacted SSL support, says Steinberg have not implemented this in the Mackie control output, and we have been able to find so far. Until that is implemented, will not be able to auto bank the UF8. The Avid artist mix would have been using Yukon, which is a different protocol. So the actual Mackie protocol doesn't incorporate banking. So if we select a track, it's not going to automatically select those events. So even with my little Chord Nano control using the MIDI remote, we can have this banking automatically done. But that's not a part of the Mackie control protocol. I think some programs have done some workarounds maybe to augment that. I think only one program is doing that, but we actually stick to the Mackie control protocol. So that's why, on a lot of Mackie controls, you have to physically bank to select channels. You have to physically bank on the unit itself, and then track selection can follow instead of selecting the track and having that be the source for the banking. So you can see even with my Chord Nano control, which is in the US $79, using the MIDI remote, it works. But when we use the Mackie control protocol, we stick to the protocol, and that didn't have the ability to do auto banking. So if your control surface doesn't do auto banking and it's using Mackie control, maybe that control surface company could come up with a protocol that works, or utilize the MIDI remote and make a MIDI remote script to have that work. All right, so we have a question. Sometimes, so when Cubase starts, it asks me to select the sound card. Is there a way to configure it to always use the last one without asking? So sometimes when it asks, it could be, and this could vary depending on operating system. So on my Windows machine, it will automatically assume that the audio interface should be used from the previous one. From the previous time I started Cubase. And if it doesn't see that audio interface, it will prompt you to kind of ask for, to select an audio interface. So if you started Cubase without an interface powered on, then it may ask you to choose the interface. On the Mac platform, if you have a monitor that's connected via HDMI, Apple is part of the operating system. It's kind of annoying. So if your display monitor is connected via HDMI, it will prompt you to select an audio device within DAWs or notation programs, because it thinks that you automatically want to send it to the HDMI output. So it kind of wreaks havoc in a lot of computer labs that have an HDMI display monitor, where the students have to always select their particular audio interface. So I guess it's a feature of Core Audio. So it's kind of out of, so those are some reasons that may cause the audio interface to get asked for. All right, so we see a question is mailed in. Is there a way to configure the recent project menu to be grouped by folders? So instead of a list of song A, version 1, song A, version 2, that each song could be in particular folders with the recent list. So I wouldn't anticipate that happening. So I think this will be just kind of a straight linear list of your recent projects. So I think that if you had it, and I haven't worked with it obviously, but if this was going to be, in folders, that I would, just go to Finder or Explorer and just have and open the projects from there, because that would be a lot more flexible than, the recent file list. So another method to kind of work with this might be to go to the MediaBay and, and just, once you kind of start your project, you could just look for, project files on, your C drive. So say, okay, I want to go to project files on my documents. And let's say if we go to projects, let's go ahead and I'll rescan this disk. So at this point, you could just, search by project files if you wanted to. So that might be so, but I wouldn't anticipate, I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but of all the feature requests that people want, having folders on the recent files list may not be the highest priority. But regardless, I'll pass it along as feedback. All right, so we had an email that just kind of came in. It says, This is from Original Samuel. I had to send my question via this channel because the reasons known to YouTube, my posts aren't showing up on YouTube. Okay. So the question is, how can I make the volume knob of my MIDI keyboard work in Cubase 8 elements? When recording, I would like to be able to control the volume directly from my MIDI keyboard. So you have to figure out what MIDI message is actually being transmitted. So, so generally when we look at a particular MIDI track, so let's say if I come and I have an instrument track here, and we could go to, you could see what kind of MIDI information is being sent. So if you wanted to just kind of come over here, see what MIDI message is being recorded. So if you come here, we can just say, okay, I'm just moving a fader. So when I want to look at that fader, I could say this is actually transmitting MIDI CC1. So when we switch over here, we can say, okay, there's my information that I've just recorded. So you could then just simply change that fader from the easiest way to do it is to take the fader from your MIDI controller and define that to MIDI CC7. So, and that is MIDI volume. So as you record an existing MIDI track, and let's say, you have CC7. So as we're recording here on top of this, so if I come here, say just record, I'll just rewind just a little bit. So now I'm recording CC7, and when I look at that, that's going to just be directly, and we'll look at our main volume that's controlling. So just have whatever controller you have, make sure that that is outputting MIDI CC7, and then it'll just be recorded directly into Cubase. So give that a shot. All right, so let's go back to our live questions. Thanks for people who sent their questions in advance. And jump back to my live feed. But we'll have some more questions now. Okay, so let me find where I was. All right, so we see Michael Pierce from London joining. Okay, so we see from Best Korean Jesus just saying, okay, I think the logical editor is about the deleting notes with the PPQ value. So it says, I think the logical editor had a preset delete short notes, and I was trying to understand the PPQ. So when we look at like the PPQ for a particular note message, we come here, we could see like, think of this as measure, beat, and then you have 4 16th note divisions. And by default, you have 120 divisions per 16th note. So you could say if I wanted something smaller than a 16th note, I would just put a PPQ of 0.0.1.0. And then anything smaller than a 16th note would get deleted. So it's just a way of defining a measure of time. Okay. All right, so Jesse Griffin's just starting to get the hang of Cubase just barely, so it's great. All right, so I just see question. What do you think about, is it Kashmir, KSHMR samples? So I haven't really heard them, or I'm not familiar with them, uh, but I could look at them after. So, all right, you see Gareth and Pablo say hello. They're busy today. All right, so we have a question from Panos. Let's say I have HALion or Contact and I want to use many instruments from it. What is the CPU and memory efficiency to create many instrument tracks of the same instrument, or create one instrument track and then create many MIDI tracks and send them to the instrument track? All right, so this is a question that comes up pretty regularly. So let's say, we have an instance of, let's say, HALion, and this could be depending on functions in the program. So when we come over here, we could say, and we look at our HALion. So the question could be, is it better to have kind of multiple instances of HALion and, with one patch loaded, or is it okay to have one instance with multiple patches loaded? So the issue gets to be, I think the RAM, the memory handling will be the same either way, but the issue gets to be with processing power, because generally most VST plugins, you have like one processor per instance of the plugin. Now, some plugins are kind of multi-core savvy. So that generally that's how, computer processing works, is each plugin or each track is going to take kind of one CPU core. So if we have one instrument with 64 tracks loaded and it's not a multi-core instrument, which is pretty rare to be a multi-core instrument, then it's better to spread those across multiple instances, because it's splitting the resources across multiple CPUs better. But in HALion, and I can't speak for Contact, but there is a multi-core function, so you could have multiple cores accessible. So if the multi-core function in HALion is enabled, then it's not as much of an issue. But if the plugin doesn't have multi-core support, then at that point, it makes sense to have one instrument with multiple instances as opposed to one instrument with multiple sounds loaded up in it. So it depends on like how the plugin is designed as well. But generally, for the most part, people will get better results having multiple instances with one sound loaded up. All right. All right. So we have a question from Ed Slater. Says, Greg, I'm recording my band live off of the floor at our rehearsal. I want to separate our temps at various songs. Should I use a different project for each song? Suggestions for best organization? So I think it's perfectly fine, to just do everything, to do all of the projects, to do all the songs live in one project. So, if you don't want to have it always, to be thinking about it, like if you just want to turn a computer on and capture everything that happened. So let's say, and it could be where you're just a situation like, okay, we're going to have so we'll come here. All right. So I'm going to select all you. So say this is song 1, and then you have song 2. Song 3, song 4, in this way, the good thing about having each song you could do it per project. You know, it's going to all go into one folder. So if you don't have a lot of space on your hard disk, then, you know, taking the time to define a new project folder, but you could, after the fact, if you have hard disk space, just simply save these two different ones. But, you know, sometimes you may say, oh, I really like, you know, the first part of, you know, this one, and we want to take the second part of that one. And then you could just come over here, and if you wanted to just, you know, delete that particular time, we'll just build this up again. So say I have this one, you know, and then at this point you could just say, you know, oh, I really liked, you know, these particular elements. You know, so if you now wanted to, you know, combine those, you know, you could just do like Command or Control plus Shift plus X and combine. So this way, you know, once you have kind of like the routing set up for the inputs, you know, unless you have like, you know, you're low on hard disk space, just record everything into one project. I mean, I you know, like I've done projects, you know, like Eric Clapton's Crossroads in 2004. I was one of the engineers on that as festival in Dallas. And, you know, we did 17 hours in one project, and it wasn't a problem. So, and that way everything is, we could break it out easily enough afterwards. But everything was kind of one project, synced to SMPTE timecode, and no issues. All right, so we have a question from Chris HALion. Is there a way to edit fades and crossfades from directly in the project window as opposed to double clicking to open the dialog window? So, you know, generally, like when we come, let's say we have a track here, we'll just make this big. So, you know, to edit the fades, you could manually, you know, some people will manually draw fades in. You know, if you wanted to say, okay, at this point we could do kind of clip gains and say, okay, at this point I want to add another one, and then we could fade, and this would be kind of before. So I'll just show it on this one so it's a little more clear. So if you wanted to just say, okay, I want it to fade out from there, you know, we could choose to just do like draw a clip gain fade. It may not be as precise as doing that, but generally, like, you know, for the cross fades, to, you know, to edit the fades, you know, we could just, you know, double click into fade area, but you could also maybe mitigate a lot of edits if you find that you wanted a different fade in type as opposed to linear. So let's say you want more sinusoid or logarithmic, you know, you could have different fades by default. And then every time that you do a fade, it could be, you know, a sinusoid cross, you know, fade out. But generally, you know, for precise editing, it's going to be double clicking to open the fade editor. So. All right, wonderful to see Mark Rabin on the live stream. He's indicating it's a gorgeous day in Montana. That's great. All right, so we see question from Alessandro. How do I stop the playhead from moving when I zoom in and out by scrolling up and down in the top transport area? So let's come over here. Just redo a bunch of changes. So say if I'm like while I'm playing and I wanted to zoom, but it moves to playhead position. So I think if you hold down shift while you do it, then it doesn't affect the cursor position, but you could zoom in. So instead of this where it moves to playhead, just come here, hold down to shift, And then you could zoom without affecting the playhead position. So, but without holding shift, as soon as I go to zoom, it may just immediately move the playhead position. So say, okay, zoomed in here. But while holding down shift, it just zooms without affecting the play position. So try that. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we have Paul the guitarist. Great to see you back on the live stream. All right, so we see question, how do you set the overall key for your track in Cubase? So if you go to, let's add a chord track. So let's say if we're here, we'll add chord track. Okay, and let's say if now you want to make sure that this icon in the chord track is turned on. So let's say, okay, here we're in the key of A. So let's say, okay, we'll go to A. And then you could see right here the key indicated, and that would also, you know, go directly into editing for Scale Assistant for both MIDI and not just MIDI, but also within Vari Audio. So you could just do that. And if you don't want to see the key there, you can now just turn that on or off. So let me know if that works for you. All right. So we just see, I would like to know if it's possible to change the modifier keys. Example, I would like to have the zoom tool when hitting the Alt key. So generally, you know, the Alt key, you know, some of the modifier keys aren't going to be assignable as actual keyboard shortcuts. So, you know, because they do, you know, because you know, your Alt key is going to be used in so many other things. So like every time you go to Alt S, do you want it to zoom and not save, you know, so, or do a save as. So, you know, you can assign it, you can assign functions to different keys, but not to modifier keys. And you could change the modifier keys. But, you know, so many operating system specific functions are going to be tied to the moderator keys that, you know, if every time you hit the shift key and shift plus something else, you know, you don't want that to, anytime you hit the shift key, to delete a part, for example. So that's why the modifier keys aren't really usable as keyboard shortcuts. So, but there's plenty of other keyboard shortcuts that you could use. But if I misunderstand, let me know. Okay, so we have another question. Question, when recording my band multi-track live at rehearsal, is there a quick way to select all tracks in my template and arm them all to record so that I hit asterisk and I got it all? So the easiest way to do this is to put them into a folder. So let's come over here. It will just do a new project. And let's assign these. We'll have, say we have 16 tracks. I'm going to select all of these tracks here. And then I'm going to right click and we'll make a folder, move selected tracks to new folder. So now I just select the particular folder track. And then all I had to do is, you know, just hit play. And if they're all record enabled, I could just, you know, record directly on the folder track. I may not have them, just probably don't have any input routing. But if you just now record enable the folder track I'll just change this to a different routing option. So now as soon as we would come, so, you know, we could record and enable all of the tracks, and then when I hit the asterisk, I could just keep that. And if you wanted to just keep that closed, you can just, you know, punch in, punch out, punch in, punch out, and then you could see all the different parts directly there. So just put them all into a folder, a master folder, and you could have folders within folders. So if you want all your drums in a folder, all your guitars, all your vocals, all the keys in different folders, you could do that and have it as a subfolder within the master folder. So you just record enable that folder and then just have that selected and then hit record, and all the tracks within that folder can automatically follow. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so we see, is there an easy way to copy paste MediaBay tags or categories to apply to other files? Right, so let's say, you know, if we have a number of files that are selected in MediaBay, so let's say, okay, I want to come here, and let me just find my folder here where we recorded this. Okay, so I'll just come over here to my pool window. I'm just going to find these. So let's say if I wanted to do this. Okay, so I'll now come over to my MediaBay folder. Instead of my pool, sorry about that. So let's say I wanted to come over here. I think it's going to be Hangouts, and then April 12th under projects. Let's see if this is the. I'll just do quick recording on my desktop. So hang on just a second. Right here. Maybe it's in a different folder. So we just. So let me just see if I can find. Just try from this one here. Sorry about that. All right, so let's get to our file browser. All right, so let's say, if we wanted to, select. All right, let's just see if we get it back. Okay, so sorry about that. So say, so if I have multiple ones, I could select multiple events here. So I'm not sure if you copy, but if you wanted to, let's see if these are selected. If I don't hit the wrong key. All right, so let's say. So you can see that we can come over here and select kind of multiple events. Let's see if we can get it to, let's say if I wanted to set these all to a key. So let's come over here, maybe. So now that I have these selected in the MediaBay, and then we come over to the right hand, we have multiple ones selected, and we change it. So I think that you could probably copy and paste and have that applied to multiple values. So if we say, okay, I want to take all these, and let's say my tempo is set, that we enter our tempo value here. So it's all set, and I want to make this, 47 beats a minute. That information and metadata is applied to all the different files in the MediaBay. So let me know if that helps. Best Korean Jesus. All right. See if I can change this back real quick. All right, thanks for all the great questions. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on the live stream. Okay, still reading. All right, we see that Pablo has a gig tonight, so we wish him well. All right, we see some moderation coming in my future. All right, my chat field just jumped. Okay. Okay, still reading through comments and questions. Okay. Okay, so we just see when monitoring when monitoring on an audio track, is it possible to hear the incoming signal on the track? Some singers like to hear what is playing back and hear their voice before punching in. So yeah, what you could do is you could switch to monitoring type. So let's say if I come here and I wanted to punch in a particular phrase. So let's say I'm here in this track and I just wanted to punch in. You could go to the preferences and go to VST, and then you'll see auto monitoring, set it to tape machine style. So now if we watch the monitor controls, so say I'll just take this off and I'll just arm this particular track for record. So while it's playing, we'll see that it's going to, so I'll just have that turned off. So let's say while it plays, we'll notice that it's going to monitor the existing track, punches in, monitor turns off, and then as soon as the punch out occurs, at that point, the monitoring will just kind of go, will be disabled. So that will only monitor during the recording process. So if we watch again and we watch kind of just the punch points here, so let's say we'll come and we have this track just record enabled, so they're going to hear their existing performance, punch in, punch out, the monitoring turns off. So again, just set this in preferences and it'll probably default to being manual. Just set the VST auto monitoring to tape machine style, and then that should work best for monitoring for tracking vocalist, especially for punches. Okay, so we have a question. Does the Cubase sampler have an envelope, filter envelope option? So let's come over here. I'll just jump home. Let's go to particular loop. Let's make a sampler track. All right, so now when you come over here to the filters, and then as soon as you click on like the mod, you can now come over here and see kind of the different filter envelopes that you can adjust directly here. So just, you know, you may not see it unless you actually click on the mod button right there in the filters. So that's where it could be accessed. All right, you see Gareth has gotten a gallon of pomegranate ice cream for him and his daughter Lola. So, or him and Lola. I think it's his daughter, maybe. Or Layla. All right. See Michael Team saying new song sounds great to Gareth. So. Okay, so we see question. During recording, how can I get the clip which I'm recording to be red, not the channel, so I can clearly see what was recorded already? Same like in other DAWs. So I think often as you're recording, so let me just come over here. And we'll add an audio track here. So you can see that while it's recording that the tracks are red, but it's going to, the events will kind of just match whatever color that you want. But if you have this across multiple tracks, you could see that it clearly indicated that what is recording versus not recording. So if I added a number of other audio tracks, And say I have this one record enabled, this one record enabled. That as we hit record, you know, it's pretty obvious which ones are recording and which ones aren't because the tracks themselves turn red. And then after you hit recording, you'll see that those events can be selected to indicate which ones have been recorded, but we don't want to necessarily override the the track colors that often are painfully set up in great detail. All right, so we have Madge Deepers checking in from the UK. Thanks for joining us again. All right, we have VTX Rudy checking in from Chicago. All right, Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button and indicates that you'll win a free prize. So, all right, so we see Uncle Ari just saying, hello, Cubase gang. So far, I like Cubase 12 a lot. That's great. Thanks for sharing. All right, so I see that Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of amaretto chocolate ice cream. So thank you. It's very generous. My son likes chocolate ice cream. He's probably been having too much ice cream on summer vacation so far. All right, so we see question, when will Cubase have its next sale? So, you know, there's always different sales going on. So we're currently in we just got out of one for competitive cross grades when some companies gave away the perpetual license option. We've also you know, we're currently in a WaveLab promotion, so there's different promotions that kind of cycle back and forth. So, you know, I don't know when the next promotion will be for Cubase, but, you know, just keep your eyes open because they kind of rotate different promotions. So. See Gareth lobbying for an additional scoop of ice cream for me. That's generous of you. All right, so we see from Ed Slater, I appreciate you taking time to answer my question. You're a fantastic resource, and the community is fortunate to have access to you, so I'm always glad to help. Okay, so we see Michael Teams. Would you use the imager on your master bus or the stereo out bus? So for most people, they often are kind of the same. So so most people, but you know, if I had to do it, I would probably do it on like the master bus. Let's say if we jump over to our Amos Moses project, and let's just take a listen to this one with it on and off. So depending on like how your setup is, so say, you know, if we're playing this and I wanted to use the imager plugin, and if you're not familiar with it, it's a multi-band imager. So if you wanted like the mids and highs to sound wider, but not the low end. So at this point, I can say, let's take this frequency range and make it wider. So I can make the guitars wider, but the low mids and like the kick narrower. So here I'm just running on my stereo out, so if we wanted to bypass that. And then even if you wanted to boost frequencies and have more output in different frequency ranges, so say you want more thump in the kick. And you can see kind of the phase display of what it's doing. So this one, and you could solo each frequency range. So you may not want this to be super wide sounding in the mix, so it's a little more focused. So some unnecessary low end information, so we kind of focus the mix a little bit there. So I'm just running on my stereo out and find that's a good place for it to be. All right, so we see from Gareth, could you show us the extra features that are available in the full version of HALion, Sir Greg? All right, so let's take a look at it. You know, we could probably do that for about 6 hours, but we'll give you kind of a quick rundown on it. So one of the things is you're going to have the ability when using HALion. So many of the instruments that Steinberg creates are kind of a version of HALion. So sometimes we may have a playback engine from HALion, but you know, we've had many people that are making, you know, nice livings creating their own particular instruments for HALion, and then they play back in HALion Sonic SE. So one of the things that you'll notice with HALion is that, you know, you could start off with, you know, as we want to add, you know, particular layers, you know, we could come over here and we're going to have different layers. So if we want to right click here, we can say, okay, let's add a new layer, and we could also create zones. And each of these zones, we could say, okay, I want it to create a synthesizer zone. So we could think of this as I want to make my own, you know, vicious instrument. So let's say, okay, this will be synth zone. And as we come to this particular layer, let's add, you know, I wanted to make it a granular synthesizer. I wanted to make it a organ zone. I want to come over here and let's make it another zone, let's say samples, and I wanted to have a wavetable zone. So when we come over here, we could just start adding. So these are kind of our different sound engines that we're working with. So, you know, we have those different components. Now, when we want to come over here and make, you know, this is kind of, you know, like looking at the circuit board of your computer. So we could say, okay, when I'm in, you know, zone 1, we can see that these, you know, when I go to my synthesizer, we can see that we're going to have our different, you know, oscillators that we could have, plus our, you know, so we're basically the building blocks of different instruments. So I go to my organ oscillator, we could just have this. And if I wanted to come over here, we could see, okay, you know, we'll have, you know, our granular layer. We could have our wavetable layer, as well as, so this is kind of like, you know, taking every concept of granular, organ, wavetable, virtual analog, and samples and combining it together to create your own sounds. Now, one of the cool things that you could do is actually have a sidechain input, so you could record directly into HALion, because most software samplers, you know, kind of lack this whole concept of not actually being able to sample into the sampler. So if you wanted to, you know, come over here, you could set up kind of even different windows, kind of zones if you wanted to. So if you say, okay, I just wanted to come over here, and you can say, okay, now I wanted this preset window configuration to do sampling, and then I wanted to create my own virtual instrument. So sometimes when we go to a particular sound, so let's say if I wanted to go to, like, let's say this particular sound, we can see that, you know, this will combine, you know, different. So when I play one sound, we could have not only, you know, different LFOs, we could have different zones. We could have, all of our effects. So this is kind of a whole sound design and creation tool. So if you wanted to create your own instruments, like from scratch, this is a perfect tool for doing that. So, and again, you can just come over here and edit every single parameter. So if you're the person that wants to design and create your own instruments, you have that option to do it. But we could, but if you wanted to just kind of play back instruments, so, here we could even kind of just say, okay, I wanted to make my own libraries where I could do the graphic images for various knobs and stuff like that for the user interface. Or if I just wanted to come over here and have different like sampling, we could have different, okay, I want to do my sample recording and editing so that we could sample, and as we just play a note, it would capture the MIDI note message, the velocity, and record the sound and associate all those things together. So if you want to make your own sounds, HALion is perfect tool for that. That's not for everyone. But if you wanted to play back sounds that have been created painstakingly and beautifully created in HALion, then you could use HALion Sonic or HALion Sonic SE. Excuse me, my son's knocking on the door. My apologies for interruption. All right, let's move on. All right, so we see a question, Cubase Artist 12, Windows 11 Pro. How do you add your name to a project for copyrights purposes? So generally, if you just want to add your particular name to it, so like as you name the project, we could do that. So but if you are creating an audio file, so let's say if we come over here and you wanted that as kind of metadata, I think we could add that in. So let's say we go to our file menu to export audio mix down. So if you come over here, we could just say, okay, let's insert the IXML chunk. So you could say author, description. So you can say copyright notice, whatever. Reference, so you could put in this data in the broadcast WAV file. So you could name the project, and obviously as you do that, that could be a digital record of, for any copyright disputes. But if you, often you'd want to maybe have that in the particular metadata as well. So in the export audio file, you could just put, the description and originator directly here, and that could be some digital date metadata that could go along with it. All right. All right, we see Cubase Junkie on the live stream. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we see Michael Teams says, Greg, going to try using the chord track on the new song, new to me. So how do I get it started? All right, so let's take a look. I think I have a project where we could just, so like, let's say you just are coming up with like the initial idea for chords. And many times as people are working, it's very easy to get into, we'll call them, perhaps a musical rut, if you will, where you kind of go to the same chord progression routinely. So when we come over here, let's just start off. So I'm just going to just have a instrument loaded up. I usually use maybe like a Fender Rhodes type of thing. And let's say I want to, at this point, or like a drum loop. All right, so let me just... So, and I have a chord track here. So if I'm just coming up with like initial ideas, I could go to my chord track. I'm just going to grab the pencil tool and we could drop a chord in. So you can say, okay, I'm in, I want to start with an F chord. Okay. I want next chord to be a B flat. And let's say I want it to end on a C 7th chord. But I don't know what chord. I know I want a different chord between the B flat and the C7. So at this point we could go to the chord assistant and we could say, okay, let's look at chords. And we could look at chords based on proximity. So say, okay, well, how will an A flat sound? Let's try maybe an F sus4. So maybe I wouldn't have thought of that chord before. But let's say, okay, I want it in a more guitar-friendly key. I could select these particular chords. And let's say as we select the chords, we can say, okay, let's just modulate down. And if we wanted to even like change the voicings for chords, we could come over here and we could just say, okay, I want to take this and I want this to be more guitar voicings versus piano, or I want it to be more complex jazz chord voicings. Or say, okay, I want this more simple. So you could just kind of try out different musical ideas. And let's say if we have all these chords and we have these here, I could just drag and drop and we could take them straight into, different MIDI, into MIDI events here, so that we could actually just see our chord data just laid out for us. So, try different chords that you wouldn't do. And also, like when we go to the chord suggestion, you could look at circle of fifths and you could just, again, just kind of try out different chords that you wouldn't normally do and use that as like the spark, the genesis of a song idea. For a lot of people, maybe they have limited harmony knowledge. It's a great tool for that. But, even if you have extensive harmony knowledge, you may follow patterns. And this could help you get out of patterns and come up with new musical ideas. All right, so we have Rolf checking in from Germany. Thanks for joining us. So Michael Teams is just asking, next Tuesday will be Zoom time. So yeah, so next Tuesday we'll do a 2-hour live stream and then probably 2 or 3 hours of the 2 or 3 hours of the Zoom meetup, since it's the last live stream of the month. And then we'll have the next one after that will be July 8th with holidays and some little travel I'm going to be doing. All right, so we see from Madge Deepers question: there's a lot of content available to install with the Pro version. Is there a recommended group of instruments, plugins that I should install? So, depending on, let's go ahead and take a look. So all of it is available to you. What I would do is maybe start off with, if it's overwhelming, you can install it all and not use it. It's not going to be in your way, but when you need to access it, it will be there. There's a lot of different things that are just kind of different content that are loops. So you could install all of the instruments, and we can see this from the Steinberg download assistant. So we go to our Cubase Pro 12. So, you've invested and have access to all these, but if you had to, like if you're short on hard disk space, I would maybe, if you don't do hip hop, you might not need hip hop loops. If you don't do like 70s soul music, maybe 70s soul loops aren't applicable, for your particular needs. Now, all of these aren't, even though it says hip hop vault, you can find sounds from one genre that will fit into, a heavy metal thing well. So, but as far as instruments, like if I had to, pick, I would do, make sure that you get Groove Agent for drums. HALion Sonic is going to play back a lot of kind of bread and butter instrument sounds, Rhodes, some strings, pianos, brass. Retrolog is an instrument, like a synthesizer, virtual analog. If you want to have really kind of ethereal, very complex sounds, Pad Shop. Verve is a piano that's kind of like layered with strings. It fits amazingly well. I think Analog Techno, these are content sets, and these are just going to be loops when it says content sets. So if you wanted to, you can install all the instruments, and as you're learning, just kind of dive in and, go through different presets and say, oh, I will use that. Or, I could see myself using that in this type of project, or that's not for me. I'm glad it's there. But if I don't want it taking up, hard disk space, which usually isn't such an issue for size wise, and it's just not your cup of tea per se, you don't have to install. But I would do all the instruments, and then, if I had to, if I was low on hard disk space, I may, go through each of the content sets separately, but do the instruments. And it's a big part of the integration and the Cubase experience is having access to all those. Okay. All right, so we see from Ted Springman, great to see you on the live stream. Does Cubase 12 have any granular playback function? If not, can anyone recommend the best granular app? So, there is a granular instrument. So if you wanted to use Pad Shop, if you come over here under synth, so this is a granular synthesizer where you could drag and drop your own sounds directly into it. So let's say if I just want it to come over here, and so if we have, let me just find something. But I could take any sound that I want and just kind of throw it in there. So say I want to take that and now run it through the same. So, definitely check out Pad Shop 2 for that. But I'm not sure if that's what you mean by kind of granular playback. But yeah, definitely investigate Pad Shop. All right, so we see Benny is just apologizing for being late. He's just played and celebrated Midsummer here in Sweden for a couple thousand people. Sounds like a lot of fun. Glad you got to do that. All right, reading through comments. Okay, so we have a question. Is it possible to automate format in Very Audio? And if not, is there any way to automate the format of audio? All right, so let's come over here. Let's jump to this project. So within Very Audio, there is a format editing. So let's say if we wanted to come over. So what I've seen some people do is just kind of chop different sections. And if we have on our smart controls to say show all smart controls here, you could adjust the format, on individual sections or individual segments. So you could take one segment and split it. If you didn't want to do that and wanted another tool for being able to adjust formats, check out the pitch shift plugin. So let's say I'll just do this from the start. So just run this as an insert. Under pitch shift, look for pitch correct. And then you can see the format shift here. Or if I want her, like singer, we'll shift the formats down. So I want her to sound maybe older. You could do a duet with the same singer, like, and separate the age by 20 years. So, so if you want to just come right over there, just use. So you could adjust that and you could automate those parameters of that plugin. And then everything that we just did was automated. So that's how you could automate formats. All right, so we have a question. So many say it's better to mix in lower volume. So we put our output level on 5 of 10. Then we want to make headroom about 6 dBs on master channel. So we lower the faders or even use pre-gain. So a lot of times when people, are talking about mixing kind of at different, mixing at lower levels, it might be like the monitoring volume. So let's say I'll just take this off and let's say, let's say if we're using like this as our monitoring volume, like my friend Elliot Shiner, who's probably, the most highly regarded mix engineer in the world, bar none. Let's say this is your comfortable monitoring position, your level, like when he's mixing, he mixes incredibly soft. Like, something like this level. And what's really interesting, like, if, I remember there was a guy who just had a cold once and I was in the studio and he was just coughing. and because Elliot mixes so low, and it was just like really distraction where it wouldn't have been an issue for anyone else. But and when he's mixing incredibly soft monitoring levels, he finds that, and I think that you'll find too that you're really actively engaged listening. So that's when a lot of people will say they don't want to mix loud. It could be just maybe a monitoring volume. So, but that doesn't affect the gain structure of the mix. That's just going to be, so if we look at our mix console, we still have kind of our full levels, but we could, just monitor very softly. And this way you can make sure like, the vocal and the snare are good balance, the kick and bass are good balance, that whatever level you're at, you hear the vocal or you hear the guitar solo. So a lot of people will mix, so it's not necessarily dropping it, your volume level by, to half, 5 of 10, but you want to make sure that, that like, and this is handy with the control room because you can decouple the monitoring volume from the gain structure of the mix going to the master fader. So, but generally, so, and it says, then we want to make headroom about, 6 dBs on the master channel. So the faders are even. So we lower the faders or even use pre-gain, so, it's just kind of, after a while, there's kind of different, gain structure strategies. So if you could give 6 dB, especially if you're handing it off to someone else who's doing mastering, if the project is ending with you and you're doing mastering, you may not have to do it at 6 dB. I know a lot of people, as I saw, transition from kind of large format analog mixing environments to working, digitally in DAWs that, they would get their mix as they normally would, and it would drop it by 6 dB. So some people would do that as kind of a transition, but you can mix at lower monitoring volumes without affecting the gain structure of the mix. And that's what's really handy about the control room. So as I adjust my control room here, we could have this is just a monitoring volume. And as I increase it, it's not affecting the gain structure as opposed to moving my master fader. So yeah, one great mix tip is always just lower the monitoring volume and really listen. So, and also just see at the end, the tracks get too low. Is it better to higher the output volume? I think if you do this, process through the whole thing, that, you're going to be fine by the time he gets to the end. So it's, don't change the output level. Try to leave your master fader as close to 0 as possible, and then, build up, and you don't have to kind of compensate for gain structure anomalies. All right. Appreciate Agent K being vigilant on his moderation. Thank you so much. And Jazz Dude as well. You guys are great. As I try to catch up. All right, my chat field just jumped. right, sorry. See, okay, so I think I'm close to where I was. All right, sorry about that. All right, so I just see Gareth says it sent me the transfer waves for Prometheus. I'll try to get it tonight. I think you sent it maybe over the weekend when I was trying not to work and do emails, but I'll try to get it. So thank you for doing that. And let me know if there's a link that that we could share on social media for Prometheus. All right. All right, so we see Hans Eric checking in from Bergen, Norway. So thanks for being on the live stream today. All right, we see Richard James. And once again, you don't have to apologize for being late. If you're late, you just have to hit the like button. That's that. And then there's no consequences other than that. All right. All right, so we see question, can you group plugins together to bypass a certain group of plugins at once? All right, so let's say, I'll just come over here. All right, and I'm just gonna add plugins. I'm gonna select all of my channels here. And I'm just gonna come over to Quick Link and I'll just add all right, so let's say we have all of these added. All right, so all right. So it says, can you group plugins together to bypass a certain group of plugins? So if you wanted to come here, let's say if I wanted to, bypass all the tracks, all the plugins on these particular tracks, like all of these plugins, and if I have Q-Link turned on, I could come over here and on the selected channels and we could turn on or off plugins, or if we wanted to, remove those plugins on particular tracks. So maybe, depending on the operations, you could come over here and let's just come back. And so if you wanted to, take different tracks and select them and, go back and forth between different plugins, you could come over here with group, with the Q-Link activated. So let me know if that would kind of do what you want to. See Jazz Dude just saying, I build gaming computers for my son. Says he has no clue about tech. Dad will do the job. I was kind of that way because my dad was kind of an electrical engineer, could fix and build anything. So I miss that day. I think my son has that gene, so it's kind of fun to watch. All right, so we see question. Hi, Greg. In your opinion, comparing stock reverb plugins with expensive industry standards, is it just that the expensive ones do it easily while the stock ones need a lot of effort to get to the same sound? I haven't really found that. I mean, I have a lot of different reverb plugins, but, I still go to, and I think we even had a discussion with this on the Zoom meetup. You know, I think Michael Pierce, I just remember him saying, you know, it's like, you know, 95% of the time I still go for Reverence as my stock reverb, you know, and I think, you know, Reverence is a wonderful reverb. And if you go through some of the plates in there, and for, you know, if you wanted to create environments that simply don't exist, Revelation is quite good. And, you know, it's like one of my friends, you know, I saw him doing a live stream and he does a lot of like really, you know, prominent hard rock stuff. And for him, it's, you know, Roomworks, you know, and so there's a lot of people just using the stock plugins, you know, the stock reverb plugins. I don't think you really have to do anything more than what you would do with any other plugin. I think there's you know, I often see people, you know, I see those people that I call it chasing the sound, and they never find the sound. You know, and we probably all know the person that has, you know, swapped out, you know, 20 different sets of guitar pickups on their Telecaster, and then they go back to like the original pickups, you know, and there's no way of like really comparing, like, you know, switching pickups or switching microphones like in a really critical A/B comparison. You know, you just have a feeling because, you know, you spent more money or you spent more time on something that it may be better. So I think for the most part, people, when they use these stock plugins, you know, find that, you know, they're highly undervalued and that they're, you know, significantly more useful than, you know, they're not a batteries included type of plugin. You know, we were selling plugins in 1995. So instead of like selling plugins as a separate add-on, you know, we tend to add value to Cubase and include those. You know, I think if you get into Squasher, you get into a FX modulator, you get into, you know, Destroyer, like those things where people are buying very specific tools that you really don't need those. And I think the same goes for the built-in Cubase reverbs. All right, just reading through some more comments. We see Razel joining from Denmark. Thanks for being a part of the live stream this afternoon. All right, we see Michael Romanowski from Coast Mastering. Thanks for joining today. All right, so we have a question. Is there a setting that always will sync play line and left locator? What I experience is that if I click with the marker tool, the left locator is set, and with arrow tool, play line is set. Okay. All right. All right, so let me just drop an audio event in. Okay. Okay, so let me just, that will always sync the play line and left locator. Okay, so if I click with the marker tool, the left locator is set, and with the arrow tool, play line is set. Okay, so let me just, so I'm not sure if it's coming here, like where you set like the left and right locator, but if you know, so now if I hold down the Alt or Option, I can set the left locator, Control or Command, the right locator, and without a modifier that I click, that it will just not set the particular locator. And I'm just going to reread this again, see if make sure I'm not misunderstanding. Okay, so setting that will always sync play line and left locator. So let's say, I think if we come, so let's say if we, all right, so let me just, so I know if you hit the 1 key, the left locator, all right, so let's say if I do this and I want to, you know, set the left locator, that, you know, if we just, so let's say my right locator is here and I want to set my left locator where the playhead is. And there may be, and there is a set left locator to project cursor position. So if we come over here under transport, so maybe if you go to, like, if you want the left locator to always be there, just go to, and you could assign a keyboard shortcut for this and set left locator. Let's see if that's already a keyboard shortcut. Sorry for hitting my mic. All right, so I'm not sure if this is, so it looks like command and num and command and the 1 key on the computer keyboard. So try that. So on the numeric keypad, so the numbers on the right. So if you have your cursor set here and then just hit 1 while holding down control. And let's see if I do it for 2 while holding down control or command, that'll work. So if you want to set the left locator to that position, to the playhead, and let me see. So let me know if that helps. All right, so we see Spike Williams checking in from Wales in the UK. All right, so we have a question from Coast Mastering, Michael Romanowski. Is it possible to batch rename all of the tracks in a project with them sequentially incremented? Okay, so let's say, all right, so I'm going to first just name these. Doesn't really matter what I name them. All right, so let's say, and we want to, so batch name with the project with them sequentially incremented. So let's come over here. I'm going to select all of these. Let's go to our project logical editor. I think we could maybe do it here. Okay, so we want to say container type is equal to track, and we want to choose transform. So let's say we want to name, let's append renumber 1. Okay, so let's see if this would do it. All right. All right, so let's see if we had this renumber. Okay, so say we generate a name. You may also be able to all right. Let's see, under generate name, if we come here. Right, so here it's kind of skipping, but let's. All right, so we can put today's date in. Let's come over here. Let's see if we just have this on renumber. So there, it's actually, I don't know, I'm not sure why it's kind of skipping, but we could do like odd numbers if we just have it on renumber. Let's see if there's, if we generate a name. Let's see, this may add 1 to everything. So it looks like we could have it skip. I could play around with it a little more, Michael, if you want to email me. And I can see if I could work out the project logical. Let's see if there's any factory presets for naming. Probably should have looked there first. Okay, so let's see if this will. Okay, so it looks like if we did this, let me remove. Okay, so we have these names. So I'm just going to say generate name. Let's see if this will just add 1, 2, 3, 4. So maybe you could, in this, you could put anything for the audio, but let me just look. So this way we could batch rename all the tracks with them sequentially incremented. So let me know if that will work for you, Michael. We might be able to kind of tweak that a little bit. See everyone discussing their age of when Cubase, how old they were when Cubase was out, making me feel very old. I see also just from about the renaming says, for example, multi-track tape transfers where everything is the same except for the name of the reel and the track number, which is incremented in each track. So yeah, so give that a try. Also, there is innuendo. So you can do it on the track level. And let me just see if you need it at the track level. Yeah, so I think that should work, Michael. Let me know if not. Okay, so we see a question. I'm wondering if there is a way to add inserts to a number of tracks at the same time without having to link the channels. So, you know, just like if we wanted to do this, you could do it through quick link. So that's probably, you know, that's probably the fastest way. So now I could take all of the selected channels, so they're not in kind of like a permanent link, and I could just add, you know, that reverb as inserts across all of the particular channels. So, but that's not a permanent link. So you could do it with Q-Link as well. Otherwise, it would have to be done manually. So, but I think if you just activate Q-Link or hold down Alt plus Shift, which would do the same thing, you don't have to assign it into a link group and then unassign it if you wanted it later. You see, Cubase Chunky just mentioning Cubase is actually older than 1989. It was just officially released in 89. So yeah, before, you know, Steinberg started in 84. And then in, you know, they had Pro 16 and Pro 24 before migrating to Cubase. And I think that was released in 89. And I think it was originally going to be coming out as Qubit, but that was a video game at the time. So I think that had migrated right before release to Cubase. They just kind of made up the name. All right, so we just see, if I remember, well, Steinberg in 2019 had some videos on how Cubase started. So yeah, I think there's a couple projects going on. So I think you could see an interview with one of the early developers, Wolfgang Kundras, and also there's an interview I saw that was posted. I haven't watched it yet, with Werner Kracht, who is, you know, one of the first Steinberg developers who's still with the company after all these years. But yeah, there's we're thinking of starting to document this stuff as well. All right, so we see from Madge Deeper's question, what is the difference between HALion 6 and HALion SE? Also, when I try to install HALion 6, it prompts me for a dongle. I'm using Pro version 12. So we can think of HALion 6 as the instrument or the tool that creates sounds that play back in other instruments, such as HALion Sonic SE. So with your... And HALion 6 is sold separately or part of the Absolute 5 collection, which is a collection of content in different instruments. So it's a separate license, and instruments and sounds that are created in HALion 6 can be played back in HALion Sonic, which is also sold separately, or HALion Sonic SE, which comes with Cubase. So with HALion Sonic SE, you could play back any sound that was created in HALion, and that's what comes with Cubase. So having a Cubase 12 license doesn't give you a HALion license, but you do have a HALion Sonic SE, like kind of the playback engine. So... All right, so we have Uno Memento from Finland, checking in from the Midnight Sunland. So thanks for joining us. All All right, so we see, can you add automation within the MIDI editor? So, it depends on, with the MIDI editor itself is, just contains MIDI information. So you could have parameters change depending on, so as soon as we have MIDI information here, so if you wanted to have, volume changes, you could do that through MIDI messages, which can play back and, play back consistently over time. So that would be a MIDI continuous controller for volume. So that could be automation, but MIDI tracks themselves don't have automation. So it contains MIDI data. Often MIDI, instruments can be automated through MIDI messages, and that would be stored within the part. But if we come over here and we automate different plugin parameters, that would be kind of like an audio. So, we can automate, where parameters will be recorded and play back the same way through MIDI messages on instruments. But if you wanted to, record the reverb plugin in the MIDI, generally that would be automated in a different area. And because it's not MIDI information. So anything within the MIDI event is going to be MIDI information. Alessandro just saying Cubase is amazing. I'm enjoying it the more I use it. See, Greg makes a beautiful, beautiful progression effortless. So I used to have a music degree. I guess I still do, but haven't been in theory mode for a long time. So I'd have to review my French augmented sixth chords usage. So. See, Madge is saying, I used to use Studio One, but Cubase has stolen my heart. So that's great. We're glad that you could be a part of the community. All right, so we have Camille checking in from the Czech Republic and Diego from Argentina. Thanks for being a part of the live stream today. All right, and we have Sai production from Czech Republic as well. So my grandparents, I think, I'm not sure if they were in Czech Republic or Slovakia, but that's where they immigrated to the U.S. from. Always wanted to go. See, Richard James is pointing out, just says regarding the content sets, his question earlier says taking up hard disk space, that you could always move them to an external drive, and you could do that through the library manager. So that's a great point. See, Madge is just saying, and thanks to all for your help. I really love this resource, especially the ice cream. So yeah, not many live streams has dedicated ice cream distribution with very creative flavors from Mr. Michael Teams. It's always appreciated. All right, so we see, speaking of Pad Shop, when are the expansions going on sale? So there could be some promotions coming up. So, but there's a lot of Pad Shop expansions are done by third-party companies as well. So, but always check out some of the like the online Music Foundry stuff, the Gary Gibbons stuff, and he does a lot of tutorial videos on Pad Shop. He's like a Pad Shop whiz, so he's so good at that. I wish I could be like as good of a sound designer as Gary is. So, but check out some of the online Music Foundry stuff. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped. Okay, so Michael Teams just asking if anyone's heard from Jan. So I'm not sure if he's on today, but he had mailed some of the questions in that we had answered earlier about the bass. Okay, just we see Graham Witcher's liking the new Hot Mess record. So thanks for your comments. Glad you like it. I think Michael, Gareth, and Pablo did wonderful jobs with all their efforts. We see a comment from Nick, and it's probably with the when we were discussing earlier about the monitoring levels. And Nick just says, "I found you don't get a proper perception of bass levels when you mix loud." So yeah, Elliot's great quote, and it's like the people that are like so good at stuff have the simplest things. It's like, oh well, of course it's going to sound better loud. You want it to sound good everywhere. So it's like, he's still like an NS10 guy. He's like, if it sounds great on that, I don't want my speakers to sound good. I want my speakers to sound bad. I want my mix to sound good. You see, and John Costigan is just mentioning taking frequent ear breaks, like 10 to 15 minutes, helps him with better mixes. All right, so we have a question. Could you demo using outboard gear such as a compressor? So I don't have any hooked up, but really all you need to do is you go to the studio menu to audio connections, and then from the audio connections you have external effects. And so here we can add an external effect, and I have some that I've added over the years. Let's say, okay, I have a distressor, and what I want to do is we're going to use available inputs and outputs of our audio interface or our converters, and we're going to use those for our input and output. So we say, okay, this is going out of this output to the unit, and the output from the unit is coming back into, this input here. So once we have that done, we can go to our audio track and go to inserts, and we will see under external plugins, we'll say, okay, let's go to our distressor. At this point, it could be by the time that the signal goes out through your different, path, your signal routing path, that it could be delayed by the time it goes out and comes back in. So we could actually measure the delay and automatically compensate for the outboard, for the latency. So we have delay compensation for the outboard gear. So, and now when you have that, you can just, the signal will, it's treated just kind of like a software plugin. You can move it in the signal flow and it will go out to the real world back, and then you could have access to it. So that's how you could use like an external processor directly inside of Cubase or Nuendo. All right, so we see, will Cubase run well on a low-end computer? So, you know, if it's, I still have like an i7, it's probably 10 years old, a laptop with 16 gigs of RAM and an SSD. And that thing just keeps chugging along really well. So, you know, but, you know, if I was going to run 3,000 tracks of audio, I could get like 100 tracks of audio with a full mix pretty easily. You know, but if I was doing a composer setup, that may not work, you know, so you could always try, you know, the trial version and see how that works. But, you know, Cubase is very efficient. But, you know, if you have a super powerful computer, it just allows you to do more. So, you know, some people will just say, I want a very simple, I want 16 tracks of audio, you know, some drum samples, and I'm good. Then Cubase would probably work fine in that scenario on a low-end computer. So. All right, so John Costigan says it's time for a likes button break. So if you haven't hit the like button, go ahead and do that so we can continue to do these live streams. All right, and Gareth is saying the new Hot Mess album Prometheus is on Spotify as well, so that's great. Released today, so. Okay, so I just see a question. When you open your session, how you color your track directly without anything? Also, for the sample, preload, and other things, could you explain what it is? Would give us when we change some of them. All right, so it's just a preference. So when I go to add tracks, I'll do a new project here. And go to your preferences. So we'll come over here. And I think it's going to be under user interface, track and mix console channels. So usually it will just be the default track. So let's say if I add a number of audio tracks, come here and no color, kind of boring. So what I could do is just come over to the preference again, and I just choose to use previous track color +1. So now when I go to add a number of tracks, they'll just automatically be incremented with my colors like so. So that's all you have to do is that preference. Probably should be on by default, but so set that there. All right, and our question for the sample preload and other things, could you explain me what is? Give us when we change some of them. So I think it might be in the studio setup. Let's get to the audio system. So disk preload. So, you know, this will, like, let's say if we're playing back a number of audio tracks, this will, you know, load up the audio into like memory so that, you know, it doesn't have any hiccups as it's playing. So, if we had like, 16 audio tracks, it may load up just the first 2 seconds so that you could hit play and have it immediately play. If you had slower, non-SSD drives, so if you had like a SATA drive or something, or more of a spinning drive, you could do that. So generally, you don't really have to change that. I've never actually changed those things, but now so that's kind of the intended purpose. It's just something from older computers and older systems that's just kind of persisted, just because it may still be used by older computers. All right, so we have a question. In Activation Manager, both Cubase 12 and Wavelab 11.1 are listed as not active, but both programs work just fine. When I try to activate, it doesn't change to activate it. Any ideas? So make sure that you're signed in to your My Steinberg account. Like I had an issue where I was kind of signed in. I have two My Steinberg accounts, one for work and one for personal, and I was signed in to my personal one when I thought I was in my work one. So check that and make sure that you're, when you go to the Steinberg Activation Manager, that it's, if you go kind of to the upper right hand side, that you go to your My Profile, that you're actually signed in there as well. See, great comment from Best Korean Jesus, just saying people overlook stock plugins and track presets, myself included. So yeah, they spend a lot of time making those, so definitely take advantage of it. All right, so we see from I think it's D. Carmichael, just saying his mom's coming home from rehab on Tuesday, concerned, glad to have something to relax to. So I think, one thing I was just playing around with, I think you had a question about the 80s kit inside of Groove Agent, and I was just kind of playing around just the other day, and I noticed that if we go to HALion Sonic SE, so I'm not sure if it's both a Groove Agent, but one other thing that you might want to try is if you come over here, let's say you go to the modern 80s kit, that, you might be able to also run the kit directly from inside of HALion Sonic SE and Groove Agent. And then when you come over here, you could do, if you wanted to adjust the volume or add more reverb. So if you're still looking for those sounds, try also, I'm not sure if you've tried it inside of HALion Sonic SE or just within Groove Agent, but give that a try. And we hope everything goes well with your mom coming home on Tuesday. All right, so we see question. Any sign of a Groove Agent dongle free update? So take maybe you could ask me on Tuesday. Just this week, Steinberg last week did the Wavelab 11.1 and the vouchers, and also Backbone was released on Wednesday. But look, ask me again on Tuesday. I'll just leave it like that. All right, you see Match Deepers has to take off. So thanks for joining us again, and we're so happy to have you in the Steinberg community. Okay, so we just see a question. How to use an LFO to modulate multiple parameters on other plugins. All right. So I think I have a project to show this. Let's see. I may have destroyed my... one of my settings, but we'll see if we can get it going here. So. All right, and this could be a little convoluted. I'll grant you that. So let's say. Okay, so let's say I just have like. All right, so let's say here. So yeah, there is an auto LFO plugin that's available as a MIDI plugin. So let's come over here and say, and what we're doing is we could just say, so let's say if I wanted to take this retro log, we could say I want to make this. So we have like our volume change. So let's say, okay, let's make this like, 8th note. Or make it 16th notes. So we could do this, and let's say if I wanted to adjust the volume. So we could kind of take, or my panning. So you can say, okay, I want this to be over 2 measures. All right, now how can we do this with like a audio plugin? So let's say if we're on this particular track and we have, excuse me, and we have a plugin. So let's go to this track and we're going to look and say we have our dual filter. And we wanted to just take this particular filter and be able to adjust this maybe on our drum. So say our position. All right, so what we could do is take a MIDI track and we're going to send it. You could have like a MIDI loopback, and you could do this on Mac by using, let's see if I have it activated, but if you go to your studio setup, so let's go to, we'll add a generic remote. And what I want to do is to use, let's see if it's, may have deactivated it. Let me just get my MIDI port set up. Yeah, but if you use a MIDI port setup, so what you can do is send MIDI out with this auto LFO plugin through the generic remote and be able to trigger that. Yeah, I don't think I have it set up anymore on my Mac for the loop back, but there is a video you could watch on doing it. So it's not the most easy way for kind of audio plugins, but it can be done. All right, so we see question, how do you extract and add grooves to MIDI? So let's say if you, we'll just take, all right, so I'll extend the length of this part. So let's say I wanted this as a particular groove. So there's a couple of ways. One is if we go to your quantize panel, I could take any audio loop or a MIDI part here. So let's say I have a MIDI part. And we say, okay, this is my cool, I wanted that as my groove. So all you have to do is drag it in, and now that will make a groove quantize preset. So when we come over here, we can see the name of it. We could also take any drum loop. And once we come over, to like a particular drum loop, Once it's in the project, I can come over here and let's get to our hit points. And so I just got an email from Zed's engineer. So if we would get to our hit points here, we could just say, okay, let's edit our hit points. And then we could go under create. We could say create groove. And then now that we create the groove, we can now quantize any MIDI, and that's now a quantized preset. So we could have it from that particular plugin, and we could have, various quantized presets. So that's how you can add grooves, extract and apply grooves. So we see just all right, so we see Graham has a comment about the stock reverb plugins. He says, in his honest opinion, you really don't need anything else, but one's already built into Cubase. Roomworks, although basic, is all you will ever need. So, all right, so we see a question. Hey, Greg, is version 12.03 the latest update? So yes, that is the current latest version. So. All right, so we see, hi, Greg. Can I rotate an audio sample clip on a track? For example, 3/16 note length. So the end of the sample is the new beginning, and do the operation without cuts, moves, pastes. Okay, so let's say we have this particular. All right, so let's say we zoom in and we want to be 3/16. All right, so let's just say we'll come here and we'll use our 16th. So let's say we're going to do 3/16. Okay. So the end of the sample is a new beginning, and continue and do the operation without cuts, moves, and pastes. Okay, so when you say like rotate, so let's say if I have this sample here, so if you want it, so when you say rotate, I'm not sure if you want it to, just select the event, and let's say if we go to audio processes and we just, reverse, if that's what you mean by rotate. So, but another thing that you could do, like if you want it just like this, if we come over, and another thing it might be is if you go to shuffle mode. So let's say if I wanted to take this and kind of have this event come before that, if I just move this like to the left, that will automatically kind of flip the two events. So I don't have to do any like cut, copy, paste, but once I've split the event, I could just drag it to the left or drag it to the right, and that will kind of flip the events. And that's when we go to our grid mode and we set that to shuffle. So maybe the shuffle mode is what you're talking about. All right, just reading through comments. So we're getting some great feedback on the new Hot Mess record. So. All right, so we see a question. Would Cubase itself be localized into European languages / Japanese / Korean? So if you want to practice your foreign languages, if we come over to your preferences, and go to General, you could run the program in English, German, Spanish, French, Italian, Japanese, Portuguese, Russian, Chinese. So, and then all the program, all the menus, all the text will be localized for the different languages. All right, and we have Steve Leeds checking in from Berkeley. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have Chris HALion saying, is it possible to reorder the channels in each mixer view? I know I can put channels into zones, but can I move each around within those zones? So it's going to be within the zones, and it's going to be kind of the same order as the project window. So if we have a number of different tracks, okay. So just sorry, I got an email from my wife. But you know, so if we have a number of tracks in our mix console and we have these split to different zones, so let's come over here to visibility and let's say our zones. So they can be kind of within the particular zones, but we can't necessarily move these independently of the particular track windows. So it could be within the zones, but we can't reorder it outside of that. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters on the live stream. She's also in the Bay Area, so on Oakland or East Bay. We have 3 people from East Bay with Michael Romanowski on. And Michael Teams is granted Sable a gallon of strawberries and cream ice cream. All right. So Michael Teams wants everyone to whack the like button. Reading through all right, so we see Jeff Sabelski from Chico, California. All right, my chat field just jumped on me. All right, so I think I'm back to where I was. All right, so we have 100 likes, so thank you very much. All right, we have Gerald Ely checking in from Martinez, California. Thanks for joining. Glad to see you on. You see Jazz Dude posted the link for Online Music Foundry for Pad Shop information and Pad Shop content. All right, so we have a question from Nick. Can you show how to decouple the punch-in points from the loop points, please? Okay, so let's say we wanted to do a punch-in that was independent or decoupled from the loop points. And we could do this what we call punch points. So let's go ahead and show it here. I'll just revert this project quickly. So generally, by default, the punch in and punch out are going to be set by the left and right locators. So say if we were doing a punch in and we want to just kind of punch in a particular, like let's say a couple of beats here. So I'm going to just, okay, so let's say we're punching in on this. So, but maybe we wanted to give a little bit more room for the person to get a couple beats before the punch in and punch out. That's when we could go to the transport and utilize punch points. So what we could do now is just say, we're going to say set punch points to the locator range. So when we see these little red areas here at the top, those are indicating that we have our punch in and punch out points. So now I'm going to set my left and right locator differently, and I'm going to have like this track. So I'll enable my cycle and I'll hit 1. So now we could have the cycle start, go for a couple beats, punch in, punch out, and then have the cycle continue and then loop, so that we could have just that one little portion within the loop as the punch in and punch out. So you see the punch, punch out, punch, punch out. So that's how you could set it up. So go to your transport and go to punch points, and then you can say set punch points from locators. So see if that helps. Okay. Okay, so we see Odavali. So thanks for joining us today. And I see you can't find any of the presets anymore, didn't move them and didn't delete them. It's for Retrolog, HALion, Pad Shop, etc. So, come over here and see if you see them in the MediaBay. So if you go to Media over here, so I'm not sure if you're doing it within the instrument, but if you go to VST Instruments, and let's say you go to Retrolog, and now you could come over here and see if you see all of your presets there. It could be that if they're not showing up there, so once again, just to do that, I'll go faster this time. We'll go to VST Instruments, to Retrolog, and, we'll come right over here, and so we could see the different presets there. If they're not showing up there, try going to your MediaBay and go to, you'll probably see it under VST3. So let's go to factory content, and then let's see if it's under there, VST3 presets, Steinberg media, and let's come over here. So you'll see, let's see if this could be the audio plugins. Maybe VST sound, and then you'll see, so come over to VST sound, and then go to Pad Shop. So now when you come over here and try to rescan, and we'll do all files, and so try just doing a quick rescan there and see if they show up. They probably will. Okay, so I just see, please forget the question I just answered. It's not a problem anymore. So, all right. right, we see Samson Strike's not a NS10M fan, so that's fine. All right, great to see Jeff Zabelski in the live stream from Chico, California. All right, so we see, hi Greg, in any previous live stream, there's an interesting question about how to shift the waveform left or right directly into sample editor with Alt and Control, not the upper view selection. So, you know, I don't know of a way to do that. So if we're in the sample editor here, so a lot of times, you know, we're thinking of this within context of the part. So, you know, like here, if we have, let's say, I'll make this larger so it's a bit easier to see. So, you know, if I have this event, and I could slip kind of within the waveform here, but let's see if I, you know, so it doesn't move it, you know, rhythmically in the sample editor, because I think it's really kind of intended to, you know, so let's say, so there isn't an equivalent, but I think that when you're, you know, moving, you know, directly here in the event that, you know, it's here, it's kind of against the timeline, and here you're kind of just editing the particular sample, but, you know, you can, you know, if you want it to kind of slide, you know, you could just go within the sample editor here, go to the audio warp. So, you know, I think it may give you kind of, you know, similar thing where you could, so you could move content, but it's not really set up to, you know, slip within the boundaries of the event. So, because as we're doing this, you know, like I can't slip an event here that's the full file. I can only slip when there's a portion of the file selected to slip within. But generally when we go into the sample editor, we're looking at the entire file. So if I have a recording here and this is the whole file, I can't slip the audio because there's not, you know, we're looking at, you know, but if I look at a subsection of the event, now we could slip because we could move kind of within the particular event. But when we double click to go into the sample editor, we're viewing the entire event. So it's not quite the same. But let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we see, thank you, Greg, and for adjust record latency, you know, so I think this is maybe a follow-up question to like the audio system. So when we have this adjust for record latency, so if we're recording and we know that there's, you know, the buffer size of the audio interface is set to, so we come over here and we say, okay, our buffer is set to 512 samples, that as we want to work with that we know, you know, not to automatically adjust for any of the buffers throughout the audio engine. And that's what the adjust for record latency allows you to do. So it records it correctly in time despite the buffer size of the audio interface. Thanks for all the great questions. See how we're doing on time. So we have about an hour left. So we see question, is the channel EQ the same quality as plugin EQ? So definitely, I mentioned Elliot Shiner when I was talking about kind of different different monitoring levels and his favorite EQ, and he has, as golden ears as anyone. But his favorite EQ is the built-in channel EQ of Nuendo. So if you wanted to come over here, if you needed to do more extensive EQ, we do have, you can see the curve EQ for if you're doing matching, or if you wanted to get more precise, where you wanted to EQ different frequencies for, in left and right and have it be linear phase. You also had the frequency EQ as well. So at that point, this could be more surgical, but for general EQ applications, the built-in EQ works incredibly well. Okay, so we have a question. What is the difference in saving presets in the top bar versus the instrument, i.e. Pad Shop, Retrolog, Groove Agent? So I'm not sure if you're... So let's come over here. Let's add Retrolog. All right, so if it's saving like the preset here, so let's say I have come over here, we've now modified it, and let's say, okay. And we saved a preset, we'll call it BKJ. Okay, so we have the ability of saving the preset in the top bar versus the instrument. So I'm not sure where the top bar is, but if we do like track presets, we could save, if it's like with using track presets, this preset will save everything in the instrument, and a track preset could also save EQs, the channel strip, and effects. So, but I'm afraid I'm misunderstanding what the top bar is. All right, reading through comments. All right, still reading. All right. All right. See discussion of bad microphone cables. It's always fun. And Nick and John Koskian say they probably have crates of bad microphone cables. You're always going to fix it before the next gig. So. All right. So we see, hi, Greg. In the MIDI logical editor, how do I translate PPQ to quarter notes? If using length, I'm trying to create a preset that divides all selected MIDI notes into quarter notes. So let's see if we can take a look. Just put a note in here. Okay, so if we wanted to set a value of quarter notes for PPQ, so we'll come over here. So see if I can figure out a way to do it, but if not, I could show you the value for it. So we'll go over here to our MIDI logical editor, and let's say, all right. Okay, so okay, so when we come over here to, let's go remove, we'll say, okay, we want to do our insert. So we'll say is equal to note, and we'll say length. All right, so we have length in PPQ. So think of this as measure, beat, 16th note division, and clock pulse. So in this case, if you want it to be a quarter note, so now you can say type is equal to note and the length in PPQ. And let's say if we want to transform, and let's take, all right, so let's take length. And so if you're doing it like, you know, here on the add PPQ, so if you want it to be one beat, you would just change the second value here to 1, and that would be a quarter note in length. So, but yeah, if you figure out how to split like one long note into that using logical editor, you know, one trick, I don't know a way of doing it, but if you come over here, one trick that you could do is, let's say we have this and we split. So if you just hold down the arrow key, and let's say we hold down the Alt key with the scissors tool, and then you could just kind of split that way manually. I don't know a way of splitting with that, but if you figure it out, let me know, and you can send me a screenshot to you can send it to Club Cubase at steinberg.de. All right, so you see Gareth is apparently constantly decoupled from his loop points. All right. All right, so we see just a question. So is there any way to do in a single export the following: track 1 plus track 2, track 1 plus track 3, track 1 plus track 4, and so on? Maybe a workaround. What I want to do is a single step export: drums plus bass, drums plus guitar, drums plus keys, drums plus bass, etc. All right, so let's go look at it. I'll just pull up another one. So yeah, we could do this with probably the, you know, utilizing the export queue. So let me just open up a project. It's maybe a little bigger. See if it's in my recent. Okay, here we go. Okay, so what we could do is actually, I'm going to just assign those to groups. Okay, so let's say I have a drum group, and I'll just hide my lower zone for now. All right, so we want to take all of our, we have our drums going to a group, and let's say we have our bass going to a group, so I'm going to add group channel. All right. And let's take my guitars and add these to a group. All right, and we'll say vocals. Okay, so if I wanted to do multiple batch exports, so we'll come over here and let's say we'll go to our export. We'll go to export audio mixdown, and we're going to click on multiple. So I'm going to say I want drums plus bass. All right, and we'll go to our export queue. Okay, and then we'll just click on add to queue. Okay, and now I want it drums plus guitar. And add to queue. Drums plus vocals. Add to queue. So now each of these can automatically just, you know, as we come here, we'll just say, you know, we could have those different files automatically exported. Just say, you know, start queue export, and then they would all be exported at one time. So let me know if that will work for you. It's from Esteban. All right, you see Jazz Dude and Agent K on their game with moderation. Thanks. I'll just go ahead and report that person. Doesn't seem to help, but can't hurt. All right, so we have John Walker just saying greetings. Thanks for joining. All right, and we have Soren from Sweden. You may hear my son playing a little piano in the background. All right, so we just see, can the cursor be about a pixel thin? So it's not adjustable that I know of. So some people want it, more people tend to want it thicker, but I don't think it's user adjustable for the play. If you mean kind of like the cursor, the playhead position here. Okay, so we have a question. So it says, hi, Greg. Sometimes the audio files I throw in the sampler track don't get copied to the project. What's the best way to make sure all files used in the project are compiled to the project audio folder? So generally, they're going to be stored, you know, as soon as it's added into a project. So let's do a new project. All right. So I'm going to, so I'll just put this, let me just pay attention to my location. So we'll create empty. All right. And I'll just store it on my desktop so I can delete it. Okay, so we have our delete folder on our desktop. Okay, so now when I go to record an audio track, all right, we'll call this test. All right, so we recorded an audio track. It's going to be placed in there. And now when we go to, let's say I wanted to now drag this to my sampler control. I can now come directly there. And so we've dragged it into the sampler track. So now we'll go to my desktop. And we'll go to our delete, and let's go to audio. I thought it would. So, and one of the things that you could come over here is let's save the preset. All right, and I'm just going to drag a different audio file in here. So let's update this. So I'll go to my media because I think it'll create like a sampler track folder, but let me just not do it from loops. I'll go to a file browser. Okay. So it looks like any time that any audio that's dragged in the sampler track is automatically, is automatically placed directly into the audio file folder. So let me know if it's, and if maybe it could be contingent. It might depend upon your preferences. Like if you drag the file in, it could be if you go to editing audio on import audio files, if you have these set to copy all files to project folder. So if that's not set, you may have to, so if that's not set there and it's still resident in its original folder, you might have to, when we go to our latest, you might have to just come over to the pool window or the media menu and choose to prepare archive. And once you go to media, and then you could just say, prepare archive. So let's say if you just come in here, you'll see when you right click, there's a prepare archive, and that will move all the files to the project folder. So check where that preference is. And again, that preference is if you come over to preferences and editing audio, that as files are copied in, if you're kind of copying it in, that it should be placed into the project folder. And then it should, all the information for the samples from the sampler track in the project should be placed in that project folder. All right. So we just see, hi, what is the best way to transpose a song? How to know which keys the song's at? Thanks, I love Cubase. So there's a couple different ways to do this. Let me just see. I think I have a project that I could open up. Let's take a look at my friend Wayne's project I worked on for him, or he let me borrow for demonstration purposes. Okay, so it says we're playing the day we first met. All right, so if we have like a chord track, what we could do is So let's say first I want to, you know, just do quick transpose. I could select, you know, an easy way to do it is just to add a transpose track. So say while it's playing, so, and if these are all kind of set to musical mode, so let me just select all of these and we'll put them, make sure that they're in musical mode. So, but some of them aren't, but let's try coming here.
Leaving now, I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago. Oh, I remember the day that we went.
So you can just transpose just like that. And then we'll go back.
And our first kiss, there was no regret. Right after that Garth Brooks show, you told your daddy and he called my mom, said you were too damn good for any boy that dumb.
So we could just take the whole project with the transpose tracks and we'll have it go back to the home key.
That was a long, long time.
So you could do that for kind of transposing events. Now you could also just take an audio or a MIDI part. So let's say I want to take this guitar part and I'm just going to drag it to a chord track. And at this point, it's going to do an analysis of our event. So it's going to tell me the key of the song here at the bottom is A major. So then that's how you could determine the key of the file. So give that a try. Okay, reading through comments, we see discussion of soldering. So yeah, my son likes to solder. Yeah, he started last year. So I had to learn a little bit. So, but he's getting quite good at it. All right, so we just see how do you make automation move with a MIDI clip when you move a MIDI clip? All right, so let's say if we have automation going on here. So let's say for this virtual instrument, now I move the part, we see that the automation moves with it. And to do that, go to your edit menu and make sure that automation follows events is checked. And then once you have that checked, then you could do that. If it's not checked, as we move the event, the automation stays still. So it's not kind of tied to it. So once again, go to edit menu and enable automation follows events, which I think is on by default. See Jeff Zabelski just mentioning he helped his dad build a Heathkit color TV from scratch in 1966. So yeah, I remember my dad built a Heathkit color TV as well. So fond memories. Hang on a second, my son's knocking. Sorry about the interruption. All right. Reading through comments. So we see fond memories of Radio Shack and Radio Shack microphone. So I still have a condenser microphone from Radio Shack as well. So I just see about the kind of the batch export queues. It says, thanks, I'll try it right now. Is that option available in Cubase 10? So that feature came in Cubase 11. So all right, reading through more comments. See, John Costigans thinks that the cursor might have used to be adjustable. He thinks, I'm not sure if it ever was, or I've never adjusted it to my knowledge, but it might be in there. All right. So we see a question. Hi, Greg. Maybe it's a question due to lack of attention. How to prevent that after a mix down, Cubase starts play the project? Thanks. Okay, so let's come over here. All right, let's say I want to do mix down of this. All right, so let's say I will create a new, I'll just create a new audio track, okay? And I'll just do my single. All right, we'll see if it plays right after. All right, so there's my mix down file, but it didn't start playing. So maybe it's something, maybe it's as a file is created that you have a media player like iTunes or something like that, as soon as a file is saved to your desktop, that it starts to play. So maybe it's another program outside of Cubase that's playing it, but it seems like that worked kind of as expected. All right, we're seeing discussions of old analog tape, and that John Costigan has a bunch of Ampex 456 quarter inch. All right, so we see Greg, thanks for the demo on the chord track, transpose and key detection. I leaped out of the chair for that one. That's from Sable Winners. So glad I could impress you. Bunch of smart German guys make me look good. Okay, just reading through more comments. We see that the Heathkit TV that Jeff Sabelski did with his dad, they watched the moon landing on, so it's great. All right, so I think I might be at the end of the questions. We'll see if there's more that come up. We already did our questions that were sent in advance. See if there's any more that come in. Thanks for all the great questions. And remember, next Tuesday, we'll have kind of a 2-hour live stream followed by a Zoom meetup. So we'll just do kind of a, so anyone that wants to kind of go online and meet each other. So there's always great discussions that go on. So I look forward to it every month. And then next Friday, a week from today, and the following Tuesday, I'll be on a short vacation. So we won't be doing live streams, but we'll sorry for knocking my phone over, but we'll resume the schedule on July 8th, just as a heads up for everyone. We hope that everyone's having a great summer so far. We'll see. All right, so we see a question. How do I use my keyboard as a MIDI keyboard? So anything that is connected to your computer. So most MIDI keyboards will have a USB connection. If your keyboard doesn't have a USB connection and it has a 5-pin DIN connection, you'll need to connect it into something that serves as a MIDI interface into your computer. And then once we have that set up, we could, basically you'll see, that MIDI interface. Once the driver is installed in the operating system, you should see it listed here. And once you have that, you could set it to all MIDI inputs. And if you wanted to start playing, you could just connect it and just start playing directly right from. And be able to access different instruments just like that. So that's how you could get a MIDI keyboard connected. And you could also hit Alt or Option plus K and be able to play there as well. And those could be triggered by hitting your computer keyboard. So if you hit Q, E, T. So you All right, we'll see if there's more questions come in. If not, we'll let everyone start be able to start my weekend just a little bit early. I'll take my son to the pool so he could get out for a little bit before I do the index later tonight. All right, so I think that's all the questions we have. So we'll go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions, and we look forward to meeting new faces on the Zoom meeting on Tuesday, and look forward to seeing all the people that have been regular attendees. Everyone, please have a wonderful weekend, first weekend of summer officially, and please stay safe and healthy. We'll see you on Tuesday. Take care.